Matthew chapter 6, the words of Christ. Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. Moreover, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear to men to be fasting. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward, but you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in a secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there too shall be your heart. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. My friend Deacon Frank Williams, who most of you all know, he was deacon at Immaculate Conception for a number of years. He's now down at St. Patrick's in Midtown. He's spoken to us a number of times, called me first part of the week, and he says, I've got a great joke for you to open your service with Sunday morning. And since Lent began in the Catholic Church, I said, Frank, can I even tell a joke during Lent? Lent is a time of sobriety and somber thoughts and seriousness. He said, yeah, just tell one and don't get too caught up with it. So I'm passing this on because I think that it's a good joke, and yet it points us toward where I want to go this morning. And Frank told me about a Catholic priest that he knew of that was working in the inner city. And he was walking down an alley one evening, and it was getting on toward dark, and it was dark, and he was on his way home. And a young man came up from behind him in that alley, put his arm around his neck, put a knife in his back, and he said to him, "Give me your money." And so the priest said, well, you've got to let go of me so I can get into my jacket. And the young man did. And he reached inside of his pocket to remove his billfold. But when he reached inside of his pocket, his jacket sort of fell away, and the young man could see his clerical collar. And when he saw the clerical collar, the young man said, "Oh, Father, I am so sorry. I didn't see your collar. I didn't realize you were a man of the cloth. I certainly don't want your money." So the priest was still a little bit shaky. He was worried. He was scared a little bit. So he reached in his pocket and he pulled out a cigar. And he says, "Here, have a cigar instead." And the young man said, "Oh no, Father, I can't do that. I gave that up for Lent." So, it got you to giggle a little bit, and it gets us into the spirit of Lent. And here we are now, the second week in Lent. And it's that period of the church year when so many people think, well, nuts. This is the time I'm supposed to feel miserable. And think about it. After all, just prior to Ash Wednesday, and some of you all may not know this, but the day prior to Ash Wednesday is known as Fat Tuesday, which means Mardi Gras in French. Do you know that, John? Anyway, that's where Fat Tuesday comes from, and it's a time, Fat Tuesday and Mardi Gras, of joy and of revelry today's society of debauchery. But it stands in sharp contrast, very sharp contrast, to what begins the next day on Ash Wednesday. Because on Ash Wednesday, the fun stops. It's over with. At least, that's the popular. That's the worldly understanding. Now, it's very strange that the word Lent originally meant springtime. It did not mean misery. And because the church season always fell at this time of the year, where we are now, the name came to apply to the religious observance as well as to what the true meaning of the word springtime was. Well, over the centuries, Lent has changed. There have been adaptations. There have been things that have just changed. The early church celebrated Lent just for a few days prior to Easter. But over time, the season of Lent grew until it became several weeks long. In the 7th century, the church officially set the period of Lent at 40 days, not counting the Sundays in there. And those 40 days were chosen, why? In order to remind the people of the temptation of Jesus out in the wilderness. And the Lenten observance, as time went on, became a time of purification and a time of preparation. I learned something as I studied this week. In the early church, baptism was performed once a year. That was it. That was the only time they performed baptism was on Easter Sunday. And an entire year's worth of converts would be brought into the church and baptized on that day. Now, Lent was the time before Easter when these converts would feast and when they would pray. And then they would fast and they would prepare themselves to be full-fledged members, deserving members of Christ's church. But as the years went by, change occurred some more. And the church began to baptize, and the church began to confirm people on days other than Easter Sunday. And Lent was no longer just a period and a time of preparation for these events of baptism. But it did remain a time of prayer and a time of fasting and a time of inward reflection and looking at ourselves. And after the Reformation, after Martin Luther, the idea, the discipline of fasting became very, very unpopular. And it has stayed that way pretty much ever since. So, as a way of preserving Lent, as a time of self-sacrifice, the church leaders then and the church leaders today encouraged people to give up something, to sacrifice something that they enjoyed doing during Lent. Now, I'm not going to ask what any of you all gave up, but a lot of folks give up soda or chocolate or something that they really, really like. A number of years ago, I was sitting in a board meeting at the church I was serving, and the gentleman who was the chairman of the board, Linda, you don't do this, during Lent suggested that they give up all church meetings for 3 months. That did not fly. But there might have been a little merit to it. So think about yourself. Think about people that you know that will talk about what they've given up for Lent and all that goes on in their lives helping them to look inward. What goes on with me? What goes on with you? Helping me in this type of self-introspection. Helping me to hear David in his prayer that I talked about earlier. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. For a number of years, I have had in my files a list of things that might help us if we gave it up for the time of Lent. And I've got good news for you. Chocolate is not one of them. Meat isn't one of them. Coca-Cola isn't one of them. But this morning I would like to give you just a few suggestions. We've got about 4 or 5 weeks more to go. And it might help you, and it might help those around us, if we listened to this list and kind of adopted it for ourselves. Let me give you my list of suggestions. Why don't we give up grumbling? Why don't we give up grumbling? Remember what the Old Testament word was when the people grumbled? Murmuring. What good does grumbling do? Do you remember what Paul's words are? In everything give thanks. Now, constructive criticism is one thing, and there is a place for that. But moaning, groaning, whining, and complaining, that is not part of any Christian discipline that I know about. Second thing, give up 10 to 15 minutes in bed. I woke up this morning. John Meady and his wife Patsy are our house guests, and every time we get together, we stay up late just reminiscing and going back. And I woke up about 6:15 this morning, and I lay there for about 20 minutes, going over what we talked about and smiling about most of it and thinking about most of it. But I do that every morning, and I suspect most of us do, that we just lie there for 15 or 20 minutes, or maybe at the end of the night. What would happen if that 15 or 20 minutes that we just lie there and collect our thoughts, if we would use that for prayer? If we would use it for Bible study? If we would just have a time of personal devotion? Might it help who we are as we relate to Christ? What happens if we would give up looking at other people's worst points and instead concentrate and focus on their best points? Every one of us in here are good people, and every one of us in here have our own faults. And it's a lot easier to have people overlook my faults if I overlook their faults first. Much easier. Look for the good in people. And maybe we could give up speaking unkindly. Maybe we could look for words that would be generous and understanding. And it costs absolutely no more to say something kind and uplifting than it does to denigrate somebody, to cut them down. Maybe we could think intentionally, and I'm guilty of this, friends, of checking our sharp tongue at the door, of checking the sarcasm that sometimes just rolls so readily out of my mouth. I know, the tongue is a deadly weapon. What about hatred? And we may not realize that it's hatred. But what happens if we would give up our hatred of anyone or anything and instead replace that feeling of dislike and hatred with a feeling of love? Love. God is love. What would happen if we replaced our feelings that are negative with the feeling of love that God gives to us? And remember, Love covers a multitude of sins. What about giving up our worry? How many of you all worry?